Hello and welcome to the third episode of our Black Tech Talent LinkedIn Live series. I'm Ben Higgin. I'm the Head of Technology and Investments here on the Executive Board at PwC. Now, this series aims to inspire a generation of Black technologists as well as explore issues impacting the Black community and the tech sector. And I know personally that the tech sector is crying out for new, fresh talent, and we also need to do more to attract Black people and also retain them once they're in our workforce. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't always happen, so we need to maintain focus and keep pushing this agenda. At PwC in the UK, we've continued our efforts to improve the representation of ethnic minority talent. At partner level, 14% of our new internal admissions came from an ethnic minority background, and we're on track to achieve our ethnicity targets across all grades by July 2025. We've also taken specific action to ensure we meet our targets to increase representation of Black talent in our student recruitment activity, but this was still only at 4% in FY22. And whilst at a partnership level, we've more than doubled the number of Black partners over the past 2 years, this is off a low base, so there is a lot to do. Now, what we have learned is that focused interventions matter. And for us, this has included supporting the 10,000 Black Interns Programme, the Black Young Professionals Network, and also the UK Black Tech Achievements Awards, as well as working with our 25 Colour Brave charities. Now, today, this episode is going to focus on a critical aspect of career development and progression. That's allyship, mentorship, and sponsorship. We're going to talk about the differences, the benefits, and share some advice on how to create those relationships on both sides. I think the real value of these sessions is, of course, answering your questions. So please send those through and we'll aim to answer them live. Now, before I start, I want to introduce my panel of guests, or let them introduce themselves. And Lola, I'm going to start with you.
Great, thanks, Ben. So I'm Lola Evans. I'm a director in our risk line of service. I've been at the firm about 14 years now, and I focus on supporting clients with finance and transformation.
Brilliant. It's great to have you. Sam.
Ben, I'm Sam Aluko. I'm a manager also in our risk line of service. I work with clients in the financial services industry with their business risks and controls. And I'm also a co-chair of the Black Network in the UK.
Brilliant. It's great to have you. And Grace.
Hi, Ben. My name is Grace, and I'm a senior associate within consulting. I sit within a sub-team called Shift, focusing on SAP and S4HANA digital transformations.
Brilliant. Well, it's great to have you all here. Right, I'm going to get into it. So, Lola, first question's going to you. Right, as somebody who is senior in our business, you do a lot of coaching, I know, and you support a lot of people. What does it mean to be an ally, a mentor, or a sponsor, right? Because they're very different things. So it'd be good to just get your perspective on those.
Yeah, definitely. And they're all really important. You know, I would say allyship really is about support. So it's a person from one group supporting another group, particularly in conversations they're not in, understanding kind of what some of the challenges are that they face and coming alongside them. And mentoring and mentorship is really about advice. So it's the things that we say, the information we give to others as they're, particularly in this context, coming up through their careers. And again, really important. And sponsorship, which I'm particularly passionate about, is really about advocacy. And in particular, it's not just about altruism, it's about the mutual benefit between the sponsee and the sponsor. So if I'm looking to sponsor someone, I'm really interested in also myself and how this is going to make my life easier by progressing someone else's career. And that's important because it creates a lot of momentum behind someone's career to have someone else invested because it's going to benefit them as well.
Yeah, I really love that. And there's kind of the way you've just described it, right? There's a role for everybody to play. Anybody can be an ally. But that sponsorship piece, which I have to admit for me is super important. I'm like you, I'm really passionate about that. I've benefited from amazing sponsors in my own career. And having that person who's actually going to take some real action and thinking about it in the context of it's a two-way thing, I think that's really important. Grace, you're kind of at the start of your career, it's fair to say. What's it meant to you to have sponsors, to have mentors?
Yeah, it's been very instrumental, I think, for me within the firm, having people sponsor me. So I have a practical example. When I was sort of getting started as a senior associate, I'd worked with a particular senior manager for about 6 months. And as we were moving on to the next stage of delivery for a particular client, and as he moved into a director role, he sort of had to bring a network of people around him that he knew would deliver for this client and have impact. And that's when we had that conversation around what can I do for you to make sure I keep you within my team. And that was then the opening for me to let him know where my career progression aims and goals were and how he can support me. So like you said, Lola, it was very much that two-way conversation that he knew I need this talent to make sure that we're delivering for this client, but then I could also then let him know where my goals are. So he was then able to sponsor me and have conversations on my behalf in rooms that I wasn't in yet to advocate for me and say, this is a key talent. I want to retain her. What can we do to make sure that we keep her? So that has been very instrumental for me. Having a sponsor is something that I'm really grateful for. But I think in terms of mentorship, it's having those people that you have that close relationship with that can sort of give you advice on a day-to-day basis. If you maybe want to go for this progression, if you want to be deployed on this project, what are the key steps that you need to take? Because they've been there before. They can almost have that bird's eye view of where you are and where you're trying to go and sort of guide and navigate you along that journey.
Yeah, it's so interesting, that sponsorship thing, and especially in a business like ours where actually, you know, people get promoted off the back of jobs that they do, and actually having somebody who's thinking, actually, I'm going to manage this. I'm going to be thinking about actually giving you the opportunity so that actually you have that, you know, that opportunity to shine. And as you say, that might be in a room that you're not in. So understanding who is in the room, right? Who's making those decisions? It doesn't matter what your business is, right? Those sorts of rooms exist in every different organizations. And I love the way that you kind of, for me, that mentor thing does feel quite different. If I think about mentors I've had in the past, they've been people who sort of are a bit separate to what I do day to day. And they're the sort of people, my dad always still jokes about it, right? There's a lady called Anne, right, who was a partner here. And for many years, she acted as a mentor to me, to the point where my dad used to say, before I made any decision, what does Anne think? Yeah. And actually, she really just provided that sort of slightly off on the side sounding board for me to just say, I'm thinking about this, what do you think? So it really resonates really well with me. Sam, so what's your experience been in terms of, have you had a mentor? Have you had sponsors? What's it felt like?
Yeah, I would say I've got a version of an Anne internally. And I'd say, honestly, my mentors have been transformational in my PwC experience because what they've done is they've empowered me to bring my authenticity to everything I do in a client perspective and non-client perspective. And what that's allowed me to do is feel ease and not burdened when I'm taking on any task. And the knock-on effect that's had is that I found that senior people resonate towards that sort of realness and that authenticity. And in my actual team, I've been able to work closely with, you know, directors and partners on some of their projects and the new markets and the new opportunities that they're pursuing. And through having that sponsorship of a director that's working closely with me, he's seeing that I'm delivering authentically. I've then been able to have access to other opportunities off the back of that, and it really has been great for my career.
I love that. It sounds like it's been a real confidence boost for you. Yeah. Is that how that works? You've had somebody who's kind of made you sort of walk a bit, I mean, you're very tall anyway, but like walk taller, right? Because
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'd say, sorry, just to add as well, as a black person as well, sort of coming into the firm as a grad, you know, when you first come in, you sort of think there aren't many senior people that look like you.
Yeah.
But when you start to find the similarities in yourself with other senior people that exist that are not necessarily black, you then start to feel more confident and empowered to bring your authenticity to all you do. And it really is transformational. It's
a really important point, that. Maybe if we can explore that a bit more. How important is it that your mentor or your sponsor looks like you or maybe understands you as a person and what you might go through, you know, as a result of being black? Is that super important, or do you think you can get around that? Because there'll be lots of organisations, and, you know, I gave the stats in terms of us, where it isn't there yet, right, where you can just look up. So how important is that, and how do you manage that? I don't know, Lola, do you want to touch on that?
Absolutely. I think it's important and it isn't at the same time. Okay. So I think people who look like you, and for me personally, having people that I could look up to that look like me, I found inspirational. You know, it's kind of having that visible role model. Even if you don't know those people, it kind of gives you that confidence boost that that's achievable for you, what they've achieved. But day to day on the ground, you want to have that connection with people. And sometimes it can be a bit of a barrier, not looking the same as people, but actually you need to get beyond that quite quickly. And as a minority of any sort, you often get used to having to build relationships with people who are different to you. So I've found actually that having people who I've got something in common with beyond skin tone, beyond gender, has helped me. And those relationships have really enabled me to have more confidence, have enabled me to learn things. So you have to look beyond sometimes just what's skin deep.
And does that involve, Grace, I don't know, but like a level of education sometimes, like, because people, and this is true of, I mean, everybody's different, right? And I always think that, you know, one of the most important skills that we talk about is actually listening. You know, how important is it that, you know, your mentors or your sponsors are kind of listening to you and really understanding you?
I think it's really important because I think off the back of BLM, I think that was a catalyst for a lot of Black initiatives across different firms, ours included. And I think that listening piece, as a Black woman, there's definitely, my experience will be very different to, say, a white man. There's different nuances there. And I think it's a two-way thing. I have to feel empowered to communicate that with you. And I think once you feel empowered to have those conversations to say, look, this is how I perceive things, this is how I would like to be supported, I would like to hope that those receiving that information, like you said, are listening and they're taking that on board and they're thinking, okay, how do we then support our Black talent to make sure that they're heard, to make sure that they're nurtured, to make sure that they're supported. And at the same time, you then have to take that action. So I do think to some extent, we have to take that action as the Black talent to communicate what we need. And like Lola said, finding the nuances of where you have things in common with people, because there's more to us than just our race, right? There's like a whole host of hobbies and interests and, you know, whether it's travel or sport, like connect with people. But sometimes maybe you just have to go above and beyond to be like, okay, maybe we don't have the same background, we don't look the same, but what is it that I can relate to this person about and start that relationship? And then that could then materialize into an allyship or a mentor relationship or maybe even a sponsor relationship. So I think there's an onus on both sides.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You talked then about the feeling of empowerment. Did that just come naturally to you? Was it something that actually you needed nurturing? It's like, how do you actually, because a lot of people I think will sit there and say, yeah, that's what I want to be. That's who I want to be. I want to be able to talk and say what I think and feel empowered. What is it that creates that environment in your view within an organization to actually empower anybody to say, you know, to be the person you've just described?
Firstly, fake it till you make it.
Love that.
They're not the easiest conversations to have, right?
Yeah.
Race conversations, they're not easy. They're uncomfortable on both sides. But I think for me, when I sort of look at my little brothers and I've got, you know, younger people that want to come up, I think I'm in this position now. What can I do to make sure that this is a better place for them when they come through the doors 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line? So it's having to just have those conversations. It's something that needs to happen. Someone needs to do it. So you just sort of have to take that plunge. And once you open up, I promise you, there'll always be someone that's receptive. It might not be everyone you have the conversation with, but even if it resonates with one person, then that's all that matters. Then you can kind of maybe start that snowball effect. So it's not easy. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it's such an easy conversation, go into it. But fake it till you make it. It's something that needs to happen. And I'm passionate about it maybe. So that's why I kind of have that momentum. But I think, yeah, you just have to go for it. There's no other way around it.
And then Sam, I guess, right, you're heavily involved in terms of the networks here at PwC. I'm assuming there's a network, there's a role for that network in creating that empowerment as well, right? And
Absolutely.
And sharing stories. I'm assuming that's how it works in the network that you run.
Absolutely. And it's really about, for me, helping people understand the business and commercial element to inclusivity. So I think for me, the empowerment piece came when I really switched in my mind the fact that, okay, I don't see many Black people or many people with my lived experience, but I'm going to turn that into a positive because maybe I think a bit differently to everyone else. And then when you then start to speak to the leaders in the team, so the partners, and then the tone from the top is correct because they understand the business element or the business case for making sure everyone in your team feels included. that then can maximize the potential of each cog within your team, and then really using the network to push that message out to people that maybe feel a bit left out or a bit, that they can't bring their whole self to their team because they are different. Really is, again, I've used the word a lot, but transformational for people's experiences.
All right, now we said we'd get practical on this, so let's get practical. Lola, I'm assuming you've had mentors, sponsors. How did you find them?
Oh, so with mentors, I think there are lots of different ways to find mentors and sponsors, to be honest. So mentors for me, I think, was a little bit about me being vulnerable, just building on what Grace has said there. You've got to be willing to be open about what you need. Someone once gave me this advice, which I take with me, about finding mentors and sponsors is about being highly competent. And we all are. We wouldn't be here if we not highly competent. We hire really good people into the firm, but it's also about being vulnerable. So sharing with people in the ordinary course of business and working with them, this is what, I want out of my career, asking people for advice. And I've also had people reach out to me, and I think this has happened more and more. I think as people have become more comfortable over the last couple of years, people saying, I can see what you've been doing in your career, I've heard about you, can I come alongside you and support you with whatever your career ambitions are? So I think we're seeing more of that now, which I think we need. I think in the past, it's been kind of left to us a little bit as some minoritized groups to go and find that. But I think we're seeing more of a push and pull.
Yeah, and other experiences in terms of actually practically, how did you find your best mentor, your best sponsor within the firm?
I'd say for me, it's been a bit of a push and pull. I think I'm really big on reverse mentoring. So one thing I've been actively involved in is mentoring partners. And a partner really put it well when I spoke to him before, when it comes to things like inclusion. They see themselves as an associate and they really just want to listen and understand people's real lived experiences. So being confident to share my story and some of other stories, anonymizing of course, but other stories from the course of sort of my roles in the people networks has really helped. And then invisible sponsors, which for me come from other people mentioning your names in rooms that you don't exist in, and really advocating and speaking good about you, then just has a snowball effect, because then other people maybe feel like they know you and someone that they trust has spoken well about you, and so they're also going to go and speak well about you. I think that's something that's really benefited my career as well.
And does it always work? I mean, I know sometimes some of my experience, people were kind of like, oh, you need a mentor, go get a mentor, and you sort of sit there and think, oh, okay, all right, and you start just having random conversations with people. And I'll be honest with you, there were quite a few of those in during the course of my career to date, where I've kind of sat there and we've both gone through the motions, and at the end of it, we've both walked out and thought, oh, we probably won't do that again. It's like, that's normal, right? I mean, have you had those experiences, Grace? I don't know if you...
So I always like to take the approach of these should be relationships that build naturally over time. So one thing that I'm quite passionate about, and before we started, Lola and Sam were asking me, so are you in Glasgow all the time, which is my base office? And I said, well, most of my team is based in London. So I do make an effort to try come to London all the time. I think there's something about interacting with your team. So it's not going, first time you meet someone, will you be my mentor because I creeped you on LinkedIn and you've got a really amazing career and I want that. Yeah. It's, okay, going into, if it's an office day, you go in, you socialize with your team. If there's things happening outside of that, that's sort of where I try to put myself, so that a relationship naturally builds over time. And then they get to know a bit about me, I get to know a bit about them, because then they can actually see where are my blind spots. And as a mentor, they can say, you're really good at this, but if you are trying to get here, maybe work on this a little bit more. I've had people recommend books to me and all these things because they know me on that level. Whereas if I just sort of cold call you and said, Ben, will you be my mentor? You don't know anything about me. So where does the advice even begin? So I think it has to be natural. It has to be with people that, have gotten to know you a little bit. So maybe not having the mindset of, I need a mentor, have a mindset of, let me create relationships with people that are where I want to be. Yeah. Let them get to know me. I want to get to know them, understand a bit more about their journey, and then we can really start to have meaningful and impactful conversations with practical steps of read this book. I mean, someone recommended, what is it? There was one called Principles, and then How to Influence People.
Right.
How to make friends and influence people.
Okay, yeah.
Because they're like, you're good at that, but maybe tailor it a little bit more. So to me, that's like a really good relationship because they know me and they know what I'm capable of, and they're trying to like grow that in me.
Yeah.
If I can just build on that point, Grace, I think it's a little bit about following the talent as well. Just going back to what I was saying earlier about the transaction of it. If you find someone, and I've definitely done this, who looks like they're on the up and up in their career, they're going to need a team, and being able to reach out to those people and work out how you might be able to help them, what you can offer. They might be missing someone, and a lot of us are, as you get more senior in the firm, people who really can organise something, and make sure everything is kind of, ticking along nicely. Actually, maybe you can be the person that can give them that skill. So I think keeping an eye out for talented people that are more senior than you is also a really good way of finding sponsors.
I think that is super smart advice, actually.
Point.
Yeah. I think anybody who sort of follows the careers of people in firms like ours, they've often been associated with other people who've been super successful. So I think, really spot advice. I'm conscious we said we would answer some questions, and we've got a few minutes left. So one of the questions we've got coming in: as a quiet achiever, how can I attract a sponsor? Lola, do you want to have a go at that?
So I sort of build on what Sam was saying earlier in terms of letting the work speak for you, and what I'd mentioned earlier also about being vulnerable. So maybe you don't want to do what I would call the beauty parade, having to go around and speak to everyone about how great you are, but maybe you can find one person, and potentially the person who you're working with quite closely, and say, I'm really interested in doing this in my career. Is there a way that you can help me? And actually in this firm, people love giving advice. They love doing that. So I would start there with one person, letting them know what you're doing and what you'd like to get out of your career.
I think just to add to that, I think within the context of our business, there's something around upskilling yourself and really being as valuable as you can be, and actively sharing that knowledge with your team. So you don't have to be the loudest in the team, but you, like Lola was saying, you let your work do the talking in that sense. So if you see that there's a big regulation that's coming out, you get really knowledgeable about that. You show your partners that I know about SOX, I know about UK SOX or anything like that. And then ultimately you then start to be seen as the subject matter expert in that, and then you're resourced on the big jobs.
Yeah. I think, my advice that my parents always told me, this maybe because, first generation, and they kind of like pushed us to be the best that we can be, is they always say, quiet mouths don't get fed. And my dad always said, quiet mouths don't get fed. I think doing your job and doing your job well is fantastic. That's the foundation, right? So if push comes to shove, you've got the stats, you've got the evidence that, look, I deliver, I, have impact. But like Sam said, there has to be an element of upskilling yourself. If you're not so confident when it comes to having conversations, or maybe letting your intentions, be known that, look, I've done this, I would like to progress, what can I do? Then maybe work on that. And I think it's important. I think as you progress, it is really important that you are your biggest advocate. You champion yourself, and you just have to be able to let people know, because sometimes if they don't know that, you're very ambitious and you want to go for something, then it's easy to get overlooked. You just have to kind of find that inner confidence. I don't really know where you'd get it, but I think it's something to be aware of and try to work on.
Agreed.
We've got another question here. So how can we help leaders to identify and nurture Black tech talent? Who wants to? Sam, do you want to start with that one?
How can we help leaders? We can make our tech talent more visible with initiatives like this. We really do need to spotlight achievements and just be more vocal about, the little wins. And I think ultimately just creating opportunities for people to showcase those skills that need nurturing.
I think the other thing I'd add to that, I'm a big believer that transparency matters. And, one of the things that we talk a lot about at the board is making statistics and data really transparent to people, not just within the firm, but actually externally. And I think there's nothing better than kind of focusing the mind than to say publicly, right, this is where we are, this is where we want to be. And therefore, it becomes people's job to think about that, right? They get measured on it, and they are, they take it, they take it really seriously. And so I think there's an element of, I think leaders have to step up and make that commitment externally and put those numbers out there and say, right, we're not where we want to be. This is where we want to get to.
Yeah. Just to mention what you had also said earlier on, Sam, about it makes commercial sense to have that diverse talent. I think there was a live stream that Kevin Ellis did, and he talks about how they won the Gymshark account. And one of the key things the CEO said is that you have a team that reflects ours. And that was talking to the diversity of the team. And to add to that, there's an article I just read this morning, and it was talking about if you have diversity of thoughts, diversity of input, the opportunities that you then have within that team to really problem solve and take yourself to the next level is massive. So from a partner perspective, it makes sense, for that leadership to have diverse talent, to have diverse Black tech talent. Let's not start putting mandates and, targets, like you said, Ben, and let's work on that. Let's be active in it because it's good for our business. It makes commercial sense. I mean, money talks. It has to. And it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, technology's got to be for all as well. That is how it's designed. And how can you make it for all if you're not representing, people in the room where it's getting made? So I absolutely agree with that. Right, we've got another one here. Do you feel it's easier for white colleagues to find mentors? Anyone want to have a go at that? I don't mind a go at that. Actually, I think there's data in terms of that, and I think I think Harvard Business Review actually did some work on that, and I suspect it is a lot easier because that point of finding common ground, relationships, shared experiences, whether it's cultural or the way you've been brought up, it's probably. It just comes more naturally, and it's a numbers game to a certain extent, and so I suspect it is easier. I don't know if you have views. It's probably hard for you to.
A partner told me a really interesting point not long ago. That she was speaking to someone from a Japanese background, and the person's incredibly quiet, like can't get a word out of them outside of what they have to say. So only by speaking to her, she started to understand that. Where she was raised sort of in her country, it's unheard of for her to be sat next to a partner and a partner to be, going by, addressing them by their first name and the partner asking what they did on the weekend and stuff. So where we talk about easier, if we have our partner group, which is, the makeup that it is, it's easier because it's more natural and it's more what you're used to find common ground and to see yourself in a younger white person that reminds you of who you about 10, 15 years ago. In terms of what can be done going forward, again, it's what Lola was saying about finding that common ground and making that effort to understand other cultures and seeing how you can make your teams more inclusive so that they can maximize what they bring to the team.
What a brilliant piece of advice for us to end on. I can't believe 30 minutes has flown by here in the studio. So look, a massive thank you for sharing your insights. I know everybody will have found that really helpful. Now, before we go, I'm delighted to share that PwC will be back at the UK Black Tech Achievements Awards in March, and we're going to be the sponsors of the Social Good Award. Now, this is an award that's open to those who are successfully applying tech to a social cause, which ties in with our purpose, which is to build trust in society and solve important problems. You'll soon be able to nominate colleagues and teams, so head over to btaawards.com to see the full list of nomination categories. Well, look, thank you for watching. If you've liked this episode, you can watch the rest of this series. Just go to events on the PwC UK LinkedIn page. Next month, we're going to focus on Black women in the tech sector, so you can sign up and watch that now, following the link in the comments section. That's all from us here in the studio, and we will see you next time.